Cool. Warm welcome to Systemize Your Success. So today I'm joined by Steve Bustin, and this is a guy that I've really been looking forward to speaking to. Now, he is all about communication. He's worked from the stage and media online. He's an award-winning professional speaker. He was named UK Speaker of the Year back in 2015. He's also a public speaking coach and an in-demand as an event emcee. I've got in my notes here. I didn't know that's how you spell MC, but there you go. He used to run a PR agency as well for 11 years, and he started a career working as a journalist for the BBC. So an absolute wealth of knowledge and experience. And he's also the author of 2 books, just to throw it in there, the Authority Guide to Presenting and Public Speaking, and from his previous life, the Authority Guide for PR for Small Business. And this is somebody, as I said, I've really looked forward to speaking with. I have done a fair bit of public speaking over the time for trying to promote my own business. And I'm always keen to get some tips and hints and suggestions on how that could be done better and improve stuff. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us, who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits, and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day, and this is Systemize Your Success. Welcome, Steve. A real pleasure to have you on the show.
You're very welcome, Steve. Lovely to meet you.
Cool. So, I mean, I've given you a very brief intro in there, but I'm sure you can do a slightly better job. Do you want to just give us, a couple of minute background history? Like, what are you doing at the moment, and what's brought you here, and what experience you bring to the table?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you say, communications is my bag, and always has been. I started a family newspaper when I was about 7 or 8, and I used to sit there and type it out on a little plastic typewriter and then pass it around my family. And I was that kid in assembly at school who always wanted to stand up and speak and do stuff and things. So, I mean, communication's always been, what I do. And it's always been an interest and passion of mine. So, primarily now I work with people, either I'm on the stage myself as a speaker and MC, or I'm teaching other people how to do it, really. But as you mentioned, my background actually is in journalism. So I started on BBC News, worked across Radio 4, Radio 5 Live, BBC One, various news programs, and ended up on the news channel. And then I came out of the BBC and crossed to the dark side and went into PR and worked in PR for many years, initially in-house with a company, and then started my own business, which gradually grew into a small agency specializing in the healthcare, aesthetics, and cosmetic surgery sector for my sins, which was not a sector I ever set out to challenge or to really head to, but seemed to come my way. But interestingly, alongside the PR, I was always being asked to go and speak at conferences and events. I was a very early adopter with social media. And so I was being asked to go and sort of explain, literally I was still doing sort of what is social media type talks. And then I was speaking at a conference about that. And somebody sort of said, "Oh, you're good at that. Can you train me how to speak?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can actually." I was also doing a lot of media interview training with my journalistic background. So I train a lot of people on how to give interviews. So, in my time, I interviewed Margaret Thatcher, I interviewed Tony Blair, I've interviewed lots of celebrities, business leaders, members of the public. Of those, I would say the hardest interviews are always members of the public, because with a politician, or even a celebrity, you have a vague idea of what they're likely to say. Member of the public, you have not got a clue what they're going to come out with. So it's always been, helping other people to communicate. That's why my business is called Get Your Voice Heard, because that's what I do. And it was a colleague actually came up with that and said, "That's what you do. You help people to get their voice heard." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right." So it is, it's absolutely about helping individuals and organizations to get their voice heard by the people who matter. And that's, I think, the key. And I think it's one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they just want to get their voice heard with actually no strategy or system behind it. So they might be out there speaking a lot, but they're not necessarily making a lot out of it in terms of either, money, fees, or in terms of business development, reaching the right market. So it's a fun way to earn a living, and as I say, I'm lucky because I get to be on stage myself, which is in some ways paid business development, quite frankly. If I'm on stage speaking or emceeing, normally at least a couple of people will come up after an event going, "Oh, you're good at that. Can you teach me how to do that?" And it's like, "Yeah, I can." So that's my bag. Say communications and helping people to get the message across.
Cool, thank you very much. I think what's interesting is obviously this is what you do. This is your thing, as in like you are speaking as a career and making money from speaking. But for many of us business owners, there's a different angle to it. We sort of often, and I know this is completely my story, hate the idea of speaking before. Well, I quite enjoy it now, but back in the day, I absolutely hate it. I'm terrified of it. I mean, I went on speaker training, and I remember like shaking at the front of the room and just couldn't believe that I was stood there. And so I was definitely one of those people that it wasn't natural to me. And but I knew I had to do it, or I felt I had to do it in order to, as you say, get your voice heard, to grow the business, to network, and to get myself out there. And it's one of the best things I ever did. I actually love speaking now, and it's something that I enjoy doing because I'm talking about something that I'm passionate about, and it's just a medium to get it out there. So I guess a long way introduction into the question or the train of thought, which is, when you're helping businesses going from this point, so maybe they're like I was, petrified. Like, what is it like? Why? How do you incentivize somebody to actually just take that first step to do it? And what should they be talking about? In a small business owner, you can pick anything that you're familiar with as a trade. Like, what is it that you say to, look, if you could just talk about this, then things will get better for you.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean about the fear. I actually have a T-shirt that says, "Your greatest fear is how I make a living." Although somebody did come up to me a while back and go, "What, you work with spiders?" I was like, "No, honestly not." That would be my greatest fear, quite frankly. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people hate the idea of public speaking, and I'm really pleased to hear that you've done it and you've trained and you've practiced and now you enjoy it. And I think that's the thing. Most people, if they're willing to put the hours in and the practice and the preparation, will end up enjoying it. So often when people come to me saying, the language is interesting. There's often, "Oh, I've got to do this. I've got this presentation coming up. I've only got 3 weeks." And there is this sense of dread. And it's like, well, why on earth did you say yes if you've got to do it? Well, I've got to do it. I've got, it's an opportunity, and I recognize the opportunity. Okay, that's a much more positive word, isn't it? It's an opportunity. And I think for a lot of people, there's a reframing job to be done in terms of taking it from this onerous, awful thing that is looming in their diary into something that actually is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity for them, and it's an opportunity for their business. And what a lot of it boils down to is an audience wants you to do well. Very few audiences are sat there going, "Oh, go on, cock it up." Because watching a speaker do badly is excruciating. It's horrible watching somebody suffer on stage. We'd rather see somebody do well. And if we are going to give you our attention, then we want that to be repaid. So there has got to be a purpose behind it. I always say an audience's attention is a privilege, and it's a privilege you have to earn. So there has to be a purpose behind why you're speaking. What do you want to achieve? Perhaps more importantly, what do the audience want to achieve? What do they want to get out of it? Why should they give you the honor of their attention? And I think once somebody starts to understand what's in it for them, but also what's in it for the audience, then they're in a much stronger position to deliver. And okay, you can get into the technical side of it, and you can get into what you use as prompts or script or whatever. But actually, so much of it underpinned is, what's the objective? What do you actually want to get out of this? And once people have started thinking in those terms, then normally they get to see that this is an opportunity, and that actually there is if you've got a call to action at the end, that's the bit that will hopefully generate more business or will generate inquiries or whatever it is you want people to do. So yeah, I spend a lot of my time working with people. It's not just, okay, let's look at how you create slides. It's actually, what's the mindset you need here? And how do we go about meeting your expectations with the expectations of those people sat out there in the dark looking at you?
It's interesting when you're saying this stuff, and this is no surprise, but before I was looking through some your website, which I'll put the link in the show notes, and we can talk about it in a minute. But you also got a great PDF on there. It's like a checklist. And I, as I said, many years ago, I did some speaker training, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember them saying those things, and there's loads of great stuff, and you picked up on some really important ones there. I think that I mean, I'm sure they're all important, but the one to me is like having a real purpose and a reason for being there, and a call to action. And that is something I got wrong so many times in the beginning, was I sort of got on stage because I felt I had to, and I had to be there, but I didn't have anything for them to do otherwise. If you want to speak to me, then I'll be at the back of the room, sort of thing, and then rough and hide.
Yeah.
But so what other mistakes do you see people making when they sort of start in the world of speaking?
Well, the classic one is they only think about themselves. What do I want to get out of this speech? What is the information that I just need to impart, without stopping and thinking, why are the audience here? Now, sometimes an audience is there because they have to, they've been told to be there. But even then, they've got objectives. What is actually they want to achieve from this? So that I think is the big mistake. I mean, other classic mistakes I see people make all the time: opening with an apology. Oh, I'm really sorry. I'm really nervous. Oh, I'm really sorry. I think this might be a bit dull. I do quite a lot of work with accountants and people working in finance, and the number of people who will start by saying, I'm really sorry, this is going to be a bit dull. And it's like, no. If you're presenting to the board as the accountant, you are the most important person in the room, because they can't make decisions until they know what you've got to tell them. So it's just like, again, there's a reframing thing. I mean, other classic mistakes, I think, would be not understanding timing, overrunning. An audience hates a speaker that overruns. If you've been given a 20-minute slot to speak, that doesn't mean you have to speak for 20 minutes. If you can say what you need to say and what the audience needs to hear in 15 or even 10, do it. That presentation was too short, said no one ever. It's just, people would rather, tell them what you need to tell them and then shut up, go to questions if you necessary, or quite frankly, go to coffee. And the audience will thank you for it. So yeah, timing's always a key one. Just to chip in on that, don't know actually how to guide themselves through. Sorry, Steve.
I was just going to say, as you were saying that, sorry to interrupt your flow of thought there, but I have been that guy at the front of a stage who 40 minutes into a 40-minute presentation, I'm only halfway through. And this horrible moment of thinking that how do I end this? Now I've got to get off the stage, but I've got to do this in slightly sort of elegant and that is it. And the reason being, didn't practice it, changed it just before I got on stage, thinking, I've got a great idea for this, it'll work really well. Don't do that. Yeah. So yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It just brought back horrible memories.
Yeah. I mean, we've all been there, and it is that thing where you look down, you suddenly look at a clock, or you glance at your watch, or you see somebody at the back of the room sort of telling you to wind up, and you go, that does come down to, as you say, lack of rehearsal and lack of preparation. I've said to people time and time again, the first time you say these words out loud must not be in front of the audience. An actor would never go on stage without rehearsing. A barrister would never stand up in court without rehearsing their arguments. And yet people will suddenly put themselves in front of a really business critical audience, or an audience that could be the making of their business, without proper rehearsal. And people say, oh, I don't have time. Make time. This is important. You've got to get this right. And people go, oh, I'll wing it. No, you actually do need to prepare. And it's about setting putting a system in place that allows you to prepare for every presentation. And I'll give an example. One of the things I do is, I use Evernote a lot. So I have Evernote on all my devices. And if I know that I've got a presentation comes up, something comes into my diary in even 6 months' time, one of the first things I will do is I will create an Evernote note for that event. And I will just start, whenever anything occurs to me about, oh, actually, I know that story would work well, or that gag will go down well, or something, I must remember to take that with me because I might need that piece of kit. I start this Evernote note going, which means that then in 5 months' time, when that event is now only a month away, and I want to really start preparing properly the content, I've already got a list of all these ideas I've had over the last few months. And it might be at this point you go, oh, actually, you know what, that gag doesn't work, or that story, actually, that's not my opening story, but it would be a nice closer. And I can start to move things around, rather than suddenly going, oh my God, I've got a blank piece of paper in front of me and I've got to create 40 minutes of content. Where do I start? So it is all about preparing, getting those ideas in place. And then, there's structure and all this stuff. And am I going to use slides? And slides are not a prerequisite. So many people, think presentation equals slides. It so doesn't. But then rehearsal, I always say it's prepare, rehearse, critique, repeat. So say it out loud. Quite frankly, prop your phone up on your desk in front of you and deliver it to your phone, watch it back, hate it, because nobody likes watching themselves on video, but critique it. Put it in front of an audience, put it in front of, a small group of colleagues or friends or family, and get them to critique it and make it better. What do they say? What's working, what's not working? Change it, try it again, and put it out there. And yes, it's time consuming, but actually, if this is a business critical presentation, it's time well spent.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I was going to actually ask you, what one thing would you suggest people could do? But you've given so many good tips there already.
Rehearse.
And I love that Evernote tip you suggested, because and it got me thinking as well. It's such a simple idea. I'm a systems guy, and I love creating things like this around, but I've never thought of that. And I've never thought of just having a little, whatever, I use Samsung Notes, Evernote, whatever, it doesn't matter. But just for that purpose of speeches, or I've done it for book ideas, when I've been thinking about chapters of books, I've never thought about it from a speech perspective. And it's so true. You come up, you're walking in, I live near the forest, I go walk in the forest or whatever, and that's when you get your best ideas.
Absolutely.
You try to hold them in your head until you get home or whatever. But simple stuff. I love it.
It also helps you realize that not every presentation is going to be the same. It's so easy when you've got, you've done a half-hour presentation that maybe you've given 2 or 3 times. It's so easy to go, I'll just do that again. But actually, every audience is different and every event's different. So, yes, you might find you can almost copy and paste something from one note onto another, saying, yes, actually, that chunk will work for this presentation again. But I just think it's, start capturing ideas. And also I find, clients will get in touch when I see the publicity for an event that I'm going to be speaking at. I might read through it and go, oh, okay, I didn't know they were speaking. I know I can do something that complements what they're doing. It just, the more preparation you can put into it, the better it's going to be at the end. And also, the less nervous you're going to be, because you've done the preparation, you've done the rehearsal. Most people's nerves are based on the fact they're underprepared. We could argue whether you can go over prepared. Answer, yes, I think you can, but most people are underprepared and it shows.
I think, go back to the other days, like that example when I completely overrun, my lack of preparation, 100%, for most of the failings that I've ever had in doing any sort of speaking or anything like that. So 100%. One of the things that you mentioned there was about, it was sort of a side comment, but I think it just fired something off in my head, which, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, about the audience and about knowing your audience. And you mentioned obviously about knowing who else is on stage with you, and that could be helpful as well. But I think that is a key lesson for me, like knowing who you're pitching to and then adapting. Say if you have got a stock presentation that you always use, but actually, thinking, look, do as much research as you possibly can about who's going to be in the room. I mean, is that something? I presume that's something that you do as part of course, really, with what you're.
And particularly, because we're talking about audiences, and you have a tendency to think of a big room, an audience of several hundred. Actually, for most of us, most of our presentations are really pitches. We're in a meeting room rather than a conference hall or any sort of big space. And I mean, it's interesting. I do a lot of work with agencies. Having run a PR agency, I know the agency world well. I do quite a lot of work with agencies, particularly around how they are pitching for work. And finding out who's in the room, find out what they're interested in. Can you actually gear your talk towards them? I worked with it was a digital comms agency a couple of years ago, and they were pitching for a particular piece of work, which was actually in fintech, but they discovered that the 3 people they were going to be pitching to, 2 of the 3 were obsessed with cycling. And they discovered this because they went and checked out their Instagram and their Twitter and all that stuff. And they're just always on, all their spare time was spent cycling. So when they came to design the pitch and say it was fintech, they gave the pitch deck a cycling theme. And they started talking about the spokes, and they talked about how we need to put the brakes on. And we talked about, the pedal, how we pedal faster and all this sort of stuff. And 2 of the 3, the 2 who were obsessed with cycling were just like, oh my God, bikes. To which the 3rd person, who of course wasn't as interested in bikes, but knew the other 2 were, just loved it because he could see how this had been pitched towards them. And it just made them stand out. Because again, I think that's one of the other problems a lot of people have when they present, is they end up presenting in pretty much the same way everybody else does. And, in pitch situations, it's actually incumbent on you to stand out, to make it clear why you are different. And a lot of businesses, in particular agencies, struggle to differentiate themselves. So, understanding your audience and gearing it directly to that audience, even right down to the individuals within that audience, can really pay dividends. So, do your research beforehand. It's, the more information you've got, the more prepared you feel, the less nervous you are, so the better you're going to present.
Yeah, no, I love it. And actually, I'm reading a book at the moment all about creating remarkable customer experiences. And one of the things they talk about there is about personalization of communication with clients. And this is a brilliant example of that. If people buy from people, and it's not all about buying and selling, but if people connect with people, let's say, it's human to human is the way the world is run. And if you go to the extent of like that guy with the bike, like, it doesn't matter if it's a bit cheesy. It's like you've bothered to do it. Nobody else does,
Yeah.
So I love it. Yeah, love it.
Because also a lot of decisions on pitch, particularly pitches, if somebody's looking at digital agencies, they might see 3 or 4 different agencies having pitched them. And actually, they all do pretty much the same thing. Their services are all pretty similar. Their price points are all probably going to be fairly similar as well. So it's actually about who do we connect with? Who do we think is going to be fun to work with? And if they show that they've done a bit of research and they understood you and what makes you tick, it's a big plus.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love it. One thing I noticed when I was trawling your trawling, is that the right word? Looking at your website, let's say.
Stalking, you mean?
Trawling, yeah. Stalking, you were stalking you earlier. You just celebrated 21 years in business, so congratulations on that.
Yeah.
And so, over that time, what have you learned? What are the biggest lessons you could share with your wisdom now as 2 decades in to help?
Well, it's interesting. I'm in the middle of writing a whole series of blog posts called 21 Lessons I've Learned from 21 Years in Business.
Great
and I sort of did the first tranche of 7. I'm just about to start the second tranche of 7. To me, I think the thing I've really learned is it's got to be fun. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're never going to do it to the best of your ability. You're never going to give it the work it needs. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, the way I describe it is, if you get Sunday night blues, change. Something's wrong. If you're employed and you get Sunday night blues, you're possibly in the wrong job. Maybe this isn't the right employer, maybe this isn't the right team, the right circumstance, whatever. If you are running your own business and you're getting Sunday night blues, you've got a problem. To me, one of my brand values within Get Your Voice Heard is fun. It's got to be fun for me to do it, and I want to make it a fun experience for everybody I work with. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be flippant or light-hearted all the way through. Although I'm probably known for humor. I used to do stand-up comedy, and I've done a lot of improv things. So people know that I will bring humor to something, but it's actually about enjoyment. It's people have got to enjoy what they're doing. So that is one of the big things for me. And I'm aware if I see a piece of work comes my way and I can look at it and think, I'm actually not going to enjoy doing that. I think that's going to be a headache. Might be the client relationship I think is going to be a bit tricky, or it might just be that it's a piece of work that isn't quite in my wheelhouse, or it might just be something that I think, oh God, I've done that far too many times. That's going to be really dull. I've learned to pass. And there are times when I have passed on pieces of work that I could probably have done if I'd wanted to. But, I thought, I don't necessarily want to. If I don't think it's going to be fun, if it's not going to make my life richer, then do I want to put myself through it? Now, I'm lucky in many ways I'm able to do that. My business is established to the point where I can, to an extent, pick and choose the work I take on. And that's a very nice position to be in. And, that has taken 21 years to get to. There is no doubt about it. In the early days of my business, I certainly took on work that wasn't quite as much fun. But I think, so yeah, that was a big lesson for me. So I think, for me, there's got to be a pleasure to it. If there's not, why are you doing it? Why are you flogging yourself? And I've seen so many people in business who are just slogging at it. And okay, so they might have a very long-term goal, but at the same time, we only live once. It's like, why spend your career flogging yourself something to potentially maybe get to a goal later on? Yeah, fine, I can understand longer-term goals, but I just think there has to be enjoyment along the way. Otherwise, there is a real problem.
Yeah. From someone who has changed their career 3 times in the past 2.5 decades, for that reason, to try to find something that I am truly enjoy every day, that is really resonates with me, because
Good.
I spent far too long doing stuff that I convinced myself I enjoyed because I was meant to, or convinced myself I was happy doing, until I finally, 7 or so years ago now, landed in what I do now and love it.
Yeah.
And you know,
Yeah.
it showed like so much, like it shows when you with your clients, like, you know, people often comment or remark to me about, you know, how much I look like I'm enjoying what I'm doing when I'm talking about my like systems, and like it's not for everyone's,
Yeah.
it's not everyone's bag, but
Right.
I love it. And so it doesn't matter whose bag it's not, you know, you know, hopefully I can help them, you know, that. And the same as you, like,
Yeah.
loving something that a lot of people hate is a great business looking business opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
No,
one of the
fantastic.
reasons, I mean, I do a lot of MC compare work, and one of the reasons I'm known for it and good at it is because I really enjoy it. And I sort of say the stage is often my happy place, but it's one of the reasons in some ways I would rather be there as MC than as keynote speaker. I do keynote though. I have a couple of things I do deliver speeches on, but actually I like the slightly more informal nature of MCing and the ability to bounce off an audience. And I find that far more fun. And again, if I'm having fun, then the audience is going to have fun. But even if I'm running a training course, you know, I like a lot of people. I run training sessions for companies and things, and if I get to see somebody on their feedback form, or they come up to me afterwards and say, "That was so much fun, I enjoyed it." The classic one is that people say, "Oh God, I hadn't expected to enjoy it." I'm like, "Why did you sign up for the course then?" But you know, people say, "I hadn't, you know, oh, I really enjoyed that. I hadn't expected to." And I think, great, I take that as a big compliment. And while I get a lot of a big buzz from being on stage, I get just as big a buzz from seeing somebody else on stage enjoying themselves as a result of the work we've done together.
Yeah, absolutely. No, fantastic. So very quickly, you've mentioned one quick systemization tip, which I love, which is the Evernote idea. Is there any other, you know, obviously this is a podcast a bit about systems. So do you any other tips from that perspective that you could share?
There's a few things. I mean, there's a few tools and things. I mean,
Yeah. You mentioned one when we were talking offline before. What was that one?
So Yoodli, YOODLI, and it's new, and it's currently in beta, and it's currently free, which is extraordinary. And it's an AI tool that you plug into Zoom, and it will listen into your speech. So particularly when you're practicing, but if you're delivering on Zoom, you can use it as well. And it will then analyze it and come back with a really detailed analysis, full transcript. It'll count the number of ums, ers, hesitations, pauses. It will measure your speed. It will measure the tone of your voice. It will measure positive and negative language, but it will also do things like it will talk about whether you're using inclusive or exclusive language, which is really fascinating. You know, we all hope that we're being inclusive for audience, but it'll notice words that you're using that could exclude some people. It will also notice things like qualifiers. You know, I think that, I believe that, are qualifiers. You know, maybe you thought of this, it's a qualifier, and it will highlight all that. I've only been playing around for the last few months, and it's just extraordinary. So yeah, Yoodli, YOODLI. So it's open to anybody. It's currently free, so I can't imagine it will be forever. But that's a good one. The other one I suggest, which is really simple, is an app on iPhone. It's called P-Clock, so PCLOCK. On Android, I believe it's called Presentation Clock, and all it is a countdown clock, and it fills the screen on your phone or your iPad, and it just means you can put it somewhere as you walk on stage. You press start as you go, and you set it to the number of minutes. So if you know you've got 25 minutes, you set it for 25 minutes. You pick it as you walk on. Just stick it on a table at the front or on the lectern, or I sometimes will ask somebody sat on a front row table to hold it for me so I can see it, and it just counts down, and it counts down in green numerals. And then you can set it. So I normally have it so at 5 minutes, the numerals go yellow. And then at 1 minute, the numerals go red. So I know that I'm getting close to it. If you do get to 0, it will then start counting up in big flashing red numerals. So you know how much you've overrun by. And it's just a brilliant tool. And particularly if you know that you have a very strict time limit, it's a great tool just to help to keep you to time and to stop you overrunning. So it's that's called P-Clock, as they on Apple, or Presentation Clock on Android. I think, and it's 99p or thereabouts on most app stores.
Cool. Oh, that's awesome. I'll check both those out. Fantastic. One last thing before you go. There's something that went on a little while ago about some dating scams that I happened to just see, and I know you mentioned that this was a fine thing to bring in and okay thing to talk about. So tell me about this, because I'm sure there's a funny story behind this to finish with.
Yeah. So yes, it's funny. If you Google my name, you will find this. That's why I tend to just bring it up. It's easier. One of my claims to fame is that I am the face of an online international dating scam. So, i.e., somebody nicked about 25 photos off my Facebook profile and uses them on dating sites to try to set up profiles to try to scam rich elderly women out of money. Now, the ultimate irony being is that I'm married to a man, so these women really aren't my type. But the worst thing about the whole thing is the scammer sends these women my photo and says, I'm 68. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being 68, but I'm not. I'm 51. So yeah, it's one of the women tracked me down. She got suspicious with some of the photos that she had been sent on one day, and in some of them my hair was silver, and in some of them my hair was still dark, and she suddenly thought there's something wrong here. So she did a reverse Google image search on them and found my website and my LinkedIn profile and Facebook profile, and she rang me, and we ended up going public. So we ended up doing, I did the Victoria Derbyshire show, we did You and Yours on Radio 4, we did a big photo shoot for the Mail, big piece in the Sunday Times, to raise awareness of romance fraud and dating scams. So it was interesting. It was a really interesting process, particularly for me being a journalist, to suddenly find myself on the other side of the story and being interviewed and things was fascinating. And actually, it had to change some of the stuff I trained, particularly when I'm doing media interview training. But yeah, it is still ongoing. Every now and I get an email from a woman going, "Oh, thank you for going public with your photos, because I was chatting to somebody who was using your pictures, and now I realize it could be a scam, and you've stopped me from being scammed." I know of at least 18 women who've dated, quote, me. But
your husband's not happy with that,
yeah. No. And there are, I suspect there are dozens, if not hundreds, out there, and I will never get those photos back. I think I'm sure they are being sold on the dark web. If you are looking for a picture, for photos or a profile of a middle-aged, white-haired, silver-haired man, here you go. There's a set of photos for them. But so yes, it is my slightly odd claim to fame is I am the face of a dating scam. And if anybody reads the Peter James novels about Roy Grace, the detective set in Brighton, which is where I live, and they're being televised now on ITV as Grace with John Sim playing Detective Grace. One of those books is based on my story, because Peter James, the novelist, saw the stuff in the papers and reached out and said, I've been thinking about writing about romance fraud. So I gave him a lot of the detail in the background to what had happened to me. And then there is a character in the book based loosely on me. And on the back cover of the book, he's described as a handsome, gay, motivational speaker. I'll take handsome, I'll take gay. I'm not really a motivational speaker. I do business content. So yeah, that's it's an odd one, but it's funny. And I have to be aware of it, because if people are Googling me, for business purposes, it is one of the things that comes up. Yeah. So sometimes it's, I have no problem talking about it if it makes one more person aware of the scope and the problem with romance fraud, and also the need to protect your online assets, and that's a whole other ball game. It's something that people need to be aware of. So yeah, and it's actually now, that is one of the keynotes I deliver. I tell the story, and I sort of play it for laughs, laughing at myself, laughing at the scammers. I do not laugh at the women at all. But then actually going on and talking about A, how I turned it into a news story, but B, how to protect yourself and your assets online, and how to protect yourself, how to stop yourself being scammed.
Oh, fantastic. Well, yeah, good to hear that you managed to create some awareness and, a good end result, if you like. That's the right way to say it, out of, something that could have been there. Well, it was a bit, can't think of the word without swearing, but yeah, rubbish. Cool. Thank you so much. And I just want to ask you one last question before we go. Two last questions, actually. Firstly, the title of this podcast is Systemize Your Success, but what does success mean to you?
Success to me means enjoyment. It does mean that actually I'm able to choose the work that I enjoy and to bring enjoyment to others when I'm doing it. So I think there's an element of that. Success clearly means reward, and that is obviously financial, but also is satisfaction and knowing that you're making a difference and helping people. And I think it is about recognizing that life is short, and success is not just measured in what's in your bank account. That actually success is so multi-layered. And I think it's so easy in business. One of the lessons I've learned in 21 years is that so many people only measure the financials, or lack of financials. And actually success is on so many other levels. And I think people forget to think about, am I enjoying this? You know, if you're in a job or a business you enjoy, you are being successful. And I think we need to recognize that.
Fantastic. Great answer. And lastly, who else do you think would be a great guest to have on this podcast?
Oh, I mean, it's funny because I work in the sort of speaking world. I meet a lot of people, but actually, there's a chap called Barry Joinson, who is he's a leadership coach. He's not quite right. He's sort of, he's somebody who helps people get their heads straight, and does have some sort of therapy background and things. But he also does a lot of work on boats. So he will take leaders and teams out on boats to understand the need for teamwork and to understand actually how leadership can pass around between a team, because if you all have your own role, you'll lead in that role and this sort of stuff. And he's a no-nonsense speaker. You know, he doesn't suffer fools, and he will call BS if he thinks it's happening. And yeah, he's a good guy, and I think he'd be a great guest.
Oh, cool. I might tap you up afterwards for a intro, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed this. I was confident I would, but you've not disappointed. So thank you very much indeed.
You're very welcome. It's lovely to talk to you.
Thanks.